Hi, welcome once again to the Soul Writers Cafe, the 10 Steps of Design, my take. So fingers crossed we can get this one going this time. So just to recap, lots of calls have been about writing processes or marketing, etc. But this particular call takes us right back to the core principles, which is how you construct your novel. So the reason for choosing this call right now is because at this particular time in the group, there's quite a few of us who are between drafts. And when you're between drafts, there's no better time than to analyse your plot and your characters, your themes, your motifs and your storylines, all that kind of stuff, just to really drill down until you've got your story spot on. But wherever you are in the writing process, whether you're before a draft, whether you're between drafts, whether you even started writing or near the end, there is something in this call for everyone. So what I was going to say was when I first started writing out, I was really adverse to plotting, and I know quite a lot of us are quite instinctive writers, and I would put myself into that category. And at university, I had a tutor that really wanted me to plot my film script. I was writing a script then at uni, and he really wanted me to break it down into this very, very detailed scene-by-scene breakdown, a document which probably was about 30 pages long in itself. And I was really adverse to doing this, and we were at loggerheads and had quite a few arguments about it. Luckily, we got on quite well. And I was like, no, you're kind of crushing my creative cell. You're squeezing all my creativity out of me. Really just like a straitjacket. So I really took one end of the spectrum back then. But then later on, when I started to write my first novel, I literally did it without any form of planning. And although it started off really well, the book soon lost its way. It lost its shape. In the words of Bake Off, it had like a really soggy bottom. And so at that point, I realised actually there was a purpose to planning. And even though it seemed to go against my creative nature, I knew I needed to find something which still still used my creativity but didn't crush it. In fact, what I've discovered by planning is actually sometimes it can increase and enhance our creativity when done in a way which is complementative, I suppose, of your style. And as you, Jean, just suggested, yes, if you mind map, that's a really nice creative way of doing it. So it's finding a way which suits your creative mind. So the reference I'm going to follow closely today is called the snowflake method. I can't remember the chap's name, but I'll write it in the group. But he's got a book and he's got a website, and if you were to kind of put into Google the snowflake design for novels, it would come up. But I've done my own little take on it. It's quite an involved method. Some of the steps I probably wouldn't necessarily use, and we'll talk about that at the end. Do you need to follow all of it, or can you just follow some of it? So the reason why you would be designing your novel before you start, the main advantage is to save time. Yeah. If you're writing a draft without any form of design, then invariably you're kind of finding the story as you go along. It's a process I've referred to before as unearthing. Literally, you're like a gold digger sifting through your first draft, trying to find the story. And as you go along, little nuggets come up. Oh, that's the character. Oh, this is another one. And so you're literally finding the story as you go along. The disadvantage to that kind of writing approach is that you might end up sifting for gold in a completely irrelevant valley, and you might spend quite a lot of the book searching in that valley when really you're not even in the right place, i.e. you end up writing a lot of tut, which is only going to have to be kind of removed on the second draft process. So if you're kind of doing it without any form of planning, what happens is at the end of your first draft, you then need to go back to your first draft and take out all the stuff which is not needed and then refine the bits that you've kept. Now, I'm not suggesting there's anything wrong with this process at all. I'm not going to be judgmental about any kind of form of writing process because each person has their own process, and I think it's really important that you find your own way. But what I am going to suggest is that particular way takes a lot of time. And so when you come to the end of your first draft and you're like, oh my God, but I've still got another mountain to climb. And that can be a little bit disheartening. So the disadvantages of not planning is you're unearthing your story as you go along. Because you don't know your story, you're literally finding it as you go along. It's particularly relevant when it comes to characters. if you haven't done any form of character planning, what happens is you're literally finding your characters as you write them, and that tends to result in a lot of unnecessary backstory because you're finding them on the page. It also takes longer to get into your story and find the main grip of your story. Sometimes you might not actually be succinct with your story and be trying to tell too many things at the same time. You may also go off on unnecessary tangents, i.e. searching for gold in the wrong valley, or kind of, in the book analogy, just spending time with some kind of character who isn't necessary or doesn't serve a function to the story. There tends to be a lot that you can cut. Your characters, like I said, might not be clearly defined, and importantly, this is probably the most important part about the planning process, they might not have a clear arc of development, because remember, each character has to go on their own story, and if you're only writing characters to sort of add contrast to your main character, and they haven't got their story, they're going to feel underdeveloped and a little bit shallow. Your first draft is going to be messy and tangled and probably really long, like we said. It leaves you a mountain to climb for your next draft, and all in all, from start to finish, i.e. publication, it will take a lot longer to write the book. That's not to say that if you do the snowflake method or my version of it, none of these problems will exist. It's not like a magic pill which is going to take away all of this stuff. Invariably, your first draft is still going to need work. Invariably, some character is going to pop up from nowhere you didn't expect. Invariably, we'll go off in a couple of tangents. But the point being that will be far less of it happening than that happening. It'll be like, rather than a kind of, I suppose, an out of control forest, it'd be like a slightly untidy wood. Okay, there's my metaphor for you. The advantages of planning is, at least to some degree, you've got something to follow. You have a map. You don't end up going down these dead-end alleys. And the best bit that comes with planning is with your characters. And that part is really fun. If you plan before you start, you're going to get to know your characters inside out. You literally climb inside their skin and see the world as they see the world. You'll know their arcs of development, how they start the novel, how they end the novel, and more importantly, what they learn along the way, i.e. what's their epiphany, what do they grow and change. You'll also know how all the characters interweave together. This is something a lot of people don't do, and if you just take one part from this call, it would be to plan all your characters' arc of development, not just your main character. So the advantages of planning, you know your characters inside out, you can literally inhabit their skin, you know their arcs of development, i.e. how they change as a result of the story. You won't get lost in the story, hopefully, fingers crossed. Your first draft is going to be neater with just a neater draft to edit, much less engulfing and daunting, kind of scary than a big mountain, a hill rather than a mountain. Let's see. Time up front, because obviously this method does take time, but it will be gained by the lesser time you spend editing. So even though you've got more investment up front, you do save time at the end of the first draft, second draft process. So in the long term, that all evens out to sort of, when you plan, it takes less time to write a book. Jen, just having a look at your question. Does the mentor have an arc of development? Yes, I think even though it might be more of a subtle arc, often the mentor can learn something from the MC as well. Okay, I'm going to talk about functions in a minute. I'm going to hold that question and go back to it in a little bit more detail in a couple of slides. This is really, really key, okay? When it comes to planning the plot, I'm the first to admit I find it really challenging. And I think that's the same for a lot of people, to literally come up with some plot out of nowhere and say, this is going to happen, that's going to happen, this is going to happen. Unless you're kind of like, I suppose, that way minded, analytical, or I don't know, I suppose for some people it can be easy, but I've always found it really challenging because I think I tend to prefer character driven stories anyway rather than plot stories. And so the main thing to remember is that for the majority of books, plot comes from character anyway. That is it. Your character is on a journey. And so these are the questions that you'll be asking yourself before you even start to plan the book. This is primarily about your main character. Who are they? What is their goal for the story? what's stopping them from achieving this goal, and then what do they learn along the way. I think that would be the first thing we'd even look at, or even bear in mind before starting a book. Imagine the plot is just another word for journey, and then you're looking at the journey of this main character. We're going to go into this in a bit more detail, so I'm not going to kind of stop too much from this page, because we do go back to this and deconstruct it a little bit more. But that's just an overview to let you know how actually plot is formed. It's not something which comes from thin air, although a lot of people do have an idea and make their characters revolve around their plot. I'm suggesting that your plot revolves around your characters. So I've taken the snow hammer. Yes, of course, nothing is a straight line. There will be side roads and perhaps subplots. So your subplots are usually formed with your other characters, which is why it's really important to have, to look into your other characters' arc of development. So your main character has the main plot. It's unusual that they've also got a subplot as well, but perhaps they have got a subplot. Let's say the main plot is to deal with the loss of their missing father. Their subplot could be to deal with their relationship with their mother, but maybe the subplot is actually about a different character. So you run that subplot on the main character. And you're absolutely right that no plot is a straight line, but that's the whole point of the journey, is that you don't want the journey to end too quickly. The journey being plot, you do have lots of obstacles and dead ends and alleyways on that plot, which form those side roads, but ultimately take them to the end destination. You wouldn't have a side road which didn't serve the main plot, otherwise the reader's going to be thinking, what the hell is that side road doing there? It's got to all serve the bigger function of the main story. But we'll go back to a little bit more detail. Good question. So looking at the older snowflake method, my take, the first thing, what you would want him to be doing, step one, is just looking at your basic story. So this is even before you get to your characters. So because probably in your head you have got an idea of the story when you start, just even if it's just like a vague idea. So what you want to be doing is just writing out a short paragraph or even a one-line outline of your story. And you don't have to worry about making it look pretty. It's really just for yourself at the moment. Although in time you could refine it and use it as part of your proposal or your synopsis. And remembering, of course, that the plot is just another word for journey. So just write this short paragraph to sum up your story. Principally, you're going to be focusing on your main character. You don't want to get your subplots in at this time when you sell a book or a movie, unless it's a multiple character-driven book, i.e. lots of characters have equal resonance in the book. It's usually focused on one person. So to make it really tight, when you do your short paragraph, you just focus on that central character, that main character that you've got. Don't worry about the subplots at the moment, because the subplots aren't going to sell your book. It's the main story which is going to sell your book. So in this example, from my book, 15-year-old Lizzie Fisher wakes up one morning with an unexpected gift. ... She can see when people are about to die. It's not the best example, but what it does do, it gets the main character in there, and it sets up the tone and the genre of the book. And that's the main story. That is the storyline, and the goal of the book is what does she do with it. But don't worry about you don't have to worry about getting this right. It's just something for you to start the juices and get it going with a rough idea, remembering you're focusing on, just the main storyline. Once you've done that, what you want to do is step away and have a look at your characters. So what is a nice idea for you to do is have an overview of your cast. And here I would suggest that you make a list of all your major characters. It really is just a list. So example, name, age, function, where do they live, and then the other comments. So here we've got Lizzie Fisher, age 15, function is the main, MC means main character. She lives in London with her mum. Other comments, she's shy, insecure outside. Her best friend is her pet dog. I could put other stuff in there, but that's just a brief overview. And then I would do the same for all the other major characters, like mum, aged whatever she is, function, she's she's to provide conflict. You could just put it like that. And then you could have like Ariadne, the grandmother function, she's the mentor, stuff like that. So just something really brief. And maybe you want to put that at this point into, want to create some sort of document to keep all of this, yeah? And either it might be a journal, or you've got a software program. I know that Jean, you use a software program, or you're going to handwrite it. Personally, I store mine all as Word documents, and then I print them out, put them into a folder. Other people might use spreadsheets, stuff like that. However you're going to print it out, make sure it's not hidden, but you've got it as your resource. And just as an aside, another really good way of a reason for doing all of this is because if you are writing a blog or you've got a Facebook page, at some point these resources are going to be really interesting for the reader. Once they've kind of read your book and got to know it, or even in the run up to releasing your book, it's either promotional material or it's additional material afterwards, rather like your extras on a DVD. On a DVD, and you have the extras. So it's good stuff just to keep, just for you, and also as something extra for your reader. I said I was going to talk about function, going back to what Genevieve said earlier on about her mentor. What we're going to do now is just have a brief reminder of the different functions of the characters. Remember that when I say function, remember each character has to serve a purpose. They're not just a pretty face in the book because you fancy having so-and-so in there. Their role is to assist the main character in their journey or to prevent them from achieving their journey. So just using Jean's book at the moment, Jean's character has witnessed a murder. I'm not entirely sure what the goal of that main character is at the moment, but the impression I've got is that they're trying to escape from whoever has committed the murder because they feel that they're after them. Okay, so if that's correct, and let's just say it's correct just for the purpose of this call, if they're trying to escape, i.e. escape for their life, then they're going to meet people along the way that are going to try and help them escape, or they're going to meet people along the way that are going to try to stop their escape. And that's basically it. And of course there's subplots, and in those subplots you've got other things going on. But that's essentially it at principle. So when we look at the type of character, we've got, these are taken from the hero's journey. They're mythical archetypes. You don't have to include all of them. And remember, a lot of them interplay against each other. So the same character might play 2 or 3 different functions, but these are the main functions. So you've got somebody called the herald. That's the person who delivers the trigger for the action to begin. They alert the reader that change is coming. So just using Jean's book again, Witness to a Murder, the trigger to the book is when the character sees that murder taking place. So really the herald is the person that does the murder. It doesn't have to be some person that comes in tooting a little trumpet saying, a change is coming. It's just a person that ignites the change. That's all. It's just a fancy word. You're probably not even conscious of the herald. So take that and just take it out of your consciousness. An ally is usually the best friend of the main character, somebody basically just on their side. So in using Genevieve's book as an example, the neighbour is an ally. She's also a mentor, but she's also an ally as well. So remember, they could be multifunctional. And also in your book, Genevieve, the neighbour is also the herald as well. She's the person that comes to the front door, boop, 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 things are changing. She suggests to the reader that things are going to change. The shapeshifter is somebody which is a character which is hard to read. So the reader and the main character doesn't necessarily know whether their intentions are true or not. Usually that's played by a love interest. So in my book, Voices of Angels, Raphael was the shapeshifter. Was he good or was he bad? Did he like Lizzie? Did he not like Lizzie? That kind of thing. Threshold guardian sounds really fancy, but it's just like a word for border guards, bouncers, entrance keepers, doormen, passport agency, anyone that blocks the way to the main character. So if there's somewhere that they have to go, you want somebody, and when they get to that destination, that would be a big opening up of their journey or of their inner ability. those people just block the way. So just thinking about your books, Jen, there could be an instance where, she's going to the forest or something, and then somebody's at the gate of the forest camping saying, oh, look, oh, you can't come in here type thing. But, your character sees a way around it. That's all that basically is. It's not a big one. Again, it's something a bit like the herald, which you would write without even thinking that you're writing. But the shadow is something that you would be consciously writing, because the shadow is just another word for enemy. It's the word for conflict in the book. So in Jean's book, obviously the enemy is the murderer and the people that are after the main character. So you'd be consciously writing the shadow, because most books have conflict in them. And normally that conflict arises from an external person. Trickster, somebody in the book who's got a little bit of lightheartedness, a little bit mischievous, just to provide some light relief. And the mentor is the guiding, wise figure of the book, and is usually an elder. Quite often, as Genevieve's question, does the mentor have a journey? It might not be as pronounced as a journey as the main character, but the main character does go on the biggest journey of all. Quite often, the mentor learns something from the main character. So, for example, let's say the mentor teaches the main character, in this case, to learn about empowerment and about forgiving herself or whatever. The mentor at the same time might be reminded of that gift for herself. She might apply it to herself, or it could be that the main character teaches them something about usefulness or whatever trait that they might have. So it's a subtler one, but yeah. Jean, I'm not sure it works for the purpose. Okay, yes, thank you. Just get what you meant then. Okay, so I don't want to spend too much time on function, because it's a bit of an aside to the story. Basically, it's just a reminder that each of your characters does have a role. That's all. Don't get alarmed at this. It's just like each of the characters has a role, and their role is to serve the story in some way. That's all. So moving on. Once you've just done that brief overview of your characters, like name, age, function, where do they live or whatever it is, you then want to have a look at the storyline for each of your main characters. And I don't know how many main characters you've got in your book, but I think for Voices of Angels, I probably had about 5. Lizzie, Rafa, Ariadne, her mum. That was it. 4. Only had 4. Oh, and maybe B, but she didn't really have much of a resolution, but she was quite shallow. That's my fault. So I had 5. So at this point, I'm looking at their storyline, and this kind of relates back to Jean's question about the straight line and the side roads and the subplots. So we're looking, and this is probably where your subplots will come from. So your character's name, let's say Lizzie Fisher, and then a 1-sentence summary of their storyline. Wakes up one morning with the ability to see people about to die, and what's she going to do with that? Their motivation, what do they want abstractly? I'll go back to that. Their goal, what do they want concretely? Their conflict, what is stopping them from reaching this goal? Their epiphany, what will they learn along the way? How will they change? And a 1-paragraph summary of their storyline. The reason for all of this is because, you do need a fully fledged storyline for each of your characters. Because otherwise they are just going to feel like devices. You're going to go, oh, ally, mentor, and then they feel really one-dimensional. Your trick or your job or your purpose or your task is to make them real. And the more that you get to know them at this step, the less you're going to feel like you're having to find them as you write the book. And this isn't just about what they look like or what they like wearing or what colour their hair is or stuff like that. This is the real storyline. This is their arc of development. And if you don't do this, you're just in danger of having these other characters just kind of inhabit the book. They don't really just move anywhere. They just feel like sort of background furniture. And the reader won't really get engaged with their journey either. And they don't necessarily all need a massive journey. Sometimes the journey can be really subtle, it doesn't, the big journey is what your main character goes on. So it's just going to be subtle journeys, but the more that you get to know them at this step, the less that you'll be writing them out, putting all that useless stuff on the page as you write the book. from experience of having worked with a lot of authors now for like quite a lot of years, a lot of time in novels I've seen is wasted with authors trying to find their characters. Yes, they write them, they find them. This kind of results in a lot of unnecessary backstory in the book, where you literally write out the backstory and it has this huge information dumps. If you know your characters up front, you start the book with them already like three-dimensional in your head. And if they're three-dimensional in your head before you even get to page one, the difference is amazing. So rather than having to write the character as I go along, you instead like drip feed hints about their character. And this is the part where you kind of, you know, the whole iceberg, but you only ever reveal the tip. And when it comes down to these storylines, they're really cool to write because it makes the character really real and human. And I think the danger is that lots of other secondary characters tend just to be sort of descriptions of people rather than having their own backstory, their own history, their own conflict, their own learning curve. And when you do this, I can't stress enough how real it makes them. I'm just going to go on to what abstract goal is. Because what we've got here, if you notice, we've got a motivation, what they want in an abstract way, and what they want concretely. So a concrete goal is one which is really tangible and obvious to the reader. Yeah, a concrete goal, I've got a slide for this. A concrete goal could be like, these are looking at my examples here. Let's say they're hunting for the killer of their best friend. That's the concrete goal, hunting for the killer. The abstract goal could be learning to let go of their best friend anyway. The concrete goal in a different one could be doing up a new house. That's the concrete goal, making it look really pretty. The abstract goal is realizing that true transformation comes from within. So the abstract goal is often a little bit more emotional and it's about inner change. It's something perhaps that the character isn't even aware of themselves. Yeah, it's connected to the concrete goal. So the abstract goal is something that they grow to understand throughout the novel. You know, for example, about let's say that the main character is looking to gain forgiveness. They're the concrete goal that they're hunting for a missing father. Yeah, that's the concrete goal. Where's my dad gone? I need to find him. So the plot hinges on trying to find the missing father. That's the journey. And along the way, they're thwarted and they've got obstacles and stuff like that. But you'd assume that the book would end with them finding the missing father. The goal is complete, yeah? But the abstract goal, which the main character may not even be aware of, but the reader is aware of, is the fact that they're looking for the father because they need to get forgiveness in some way. And it might not be something, like I said, that they're even aware of, but the reader could be aware of, but they go to understand that about themselves as the novel goes on. Oh shit, why am I looking for my father? Is it because actually I need them to tell me that they forgive me for something? And then at the end, and at the end, then when they see the father and the concrete goal is resolved, I found my father, the abstract goal is also resolved, i.e., I found my father, you know what? I didn't even need forgiveness all along. I'm the person that can forgive myself. I don't need it from him. It's a little bit tricky to explain, but I hope that's clarified it for you. If you've got any questions, do say. But often the abstract goal is a lot more subtle. And it often is the take-home message of the book, i.e. it's the epiphany of the main character, which is, I didn't need forgiveness from him, I can create my own forgiveness. Or, I don't need to make a house look really pretty on the outside to make myself feel good. It's the inside I need to change, really. Or, you know what, I didn't need to find the killer of my best friend. You know what I really needed to do was to let go of my best friend and say goodbye. So I hope that all makes sense for you. So a concrete goal is something what the plot hinges on, trying to find a father, you're trying to find a killer, trying to escape from a killer. you know, trying to get over the death of your best friend, i.e. your cat, in this place for you, Genevieve. You know, that's your concrete goal, but the abstract goal is more, you know, emotional, psychological. And like I said, it's often the take-home message you want the reader to get. Lizzie's abstract goal was, you know, the need for empowerment, that she needed to love herself and stand up for herself. That was also what the reader takes home with them. Oh yeah, you know what? If I stand up for myself, then I'm empowered. Yeah. So that's something you can do for all your characters, you know, your main characters, their name, the summary, their motivation, their concrete goal. Then looking at their concrete goal, what stops them from reaching their goal, going back to Jean's book, which isn't really Jean's book, but I'm pretending it is for the purposes of this call. It's, you know, she's trying to escape from the people that have killed that person that she's seen. And then while she's trying to escape, there's all these things on the way which are stopping her from escaping and letting the real killer catch up with her. And then along the way, they kind of learn, oh, you know what, I don't know what the epiphany would be in that novel, but they might learn something like, oh, I needed to, gosh, I can't think of an epiphany. But anyway, there you go. There's a concrete goal and an abstract goal. I'm going to go on to step 4 now. So we've had 3 steps. We've had the 1 paragraph overview of your book, where you're literally focusing on the main storyline. That won't have taken you that long to do. And then you've had a look at you've done a quick sort of cast list. Imagine it like the credits rolling out from a movie. You just expanded that to about, you know, like name, age, function, 1-line summary. You know, that's it. And then you've done the character storylines for your main characters. So all of that, I anticipate probably would have taken you about 2 days. Maybe a bit longer for some people, maybe even shorter for other people. But it wouldn't have taken you a long time, put it that way. But at this point, you know, you'll already be kind of getting to know your story. And perhaps if you did your storylines, it actually then encouraged you to change your main, you know, your 1-line your paragraph about it. Along the way, you might constantly be revising, which is fine. That's the purpose of this. So, oh yeah, character point of views, which is probably my favourite part of this whole planning process. And I think this part is particularly creative and, you know, fun. And what it is what you're going to do is get inside the skin of each of your characters to see what they can tell you. And the best way of doing this is to write a 1-page description of the storyline from the point of view of each of your major characters. And you'd write it in the first person. So, for example, I could write a first-person point of view of Voices of Angels from the point of view of Ariadne, like, oh, it's been really bad, but, you know, one day my granddaughter turned up, oh my God, and she kind of like seemed so sort of awkward and misplaced, and I just knew that there was something more going on that she wasn't telling me, but I'm patient enough to wait to see what happened, you know, stuff like that. And then what's interesting about that is you actually really start to get a grip on their voice and how they speak comes to you, which is really cool for their dialogue and their voice later on as well, because it really gives you some insight. And it also kind of like, you can see all the other characters from this new perspective. So let's say you've been focusing on telling the story from Lucy's point of view or so-and-so's point of view. And then if you're only seeing it from so-and-so's point of view, you might have quite a narrow lens on the whole book. But as soon as you start seeing it from, you know, another person's point of view, which you probably won't even use this narration in the book, especially if you just got like a third-person narrative or first-person narrative, what it does, it just kind of like widens the whole perspective and the lens on your book, and it gives you a different perspective. And it really helps to kind of give you a story arc for all your characters. And that's something that we often miss, that story arc for all of the characters, and also just really getting a feel of your characters. And you might find during this step that you go back and amend step 2, which is the storyline, or not step 3, sorry, which is the storyline. Because what I found with kind of doing this step, and like I said, I really like this step, it's fun, it's creative, you're kind of telling the book from all these different points of view, and you've got all these different voices going on. It's fun. And you get inside the skin of your characters, and it throws up a few curveballs. You thought the story was going to be one thing, and suddenly you've got so and so, let's say Fenna, telling the story for you. You're like, hey, whoa, where did that come from? Oh my god, yeah, that really needs to be in the book. I was doing this yesterday for my new book, which I've written a draft of, put it to one side because I'm not particularly happy with it. And so I thought, rather than go back and try and hammer out another draft, I'll just take it back to the basics and sort of do all of this. And I couldn't figure out an ending for the father. I thought, oh, it was just like a big blank space. And so I did this, and it's like, oh yeah, my God, of course, this is what's going to happen to him at the end. That's perfect. And he told me what was going to happen in his words. So that's what's really cool about it. You know, literally your characters, when you're writing them in a first person, will tell you what's going to happen to them. And I think also it just makes your characters really rounded. You know, it makes them really alive. And on an energetic level, I really think it connects you to these other characters. You know, you're the spider and you've got this web. And if you've only been kind of having your main character and perhaps their enemy in the web, you're not really connected to all these other characters. If you get inside the skin of the other characters, you create that connection with them on a more energetic level. So when you're writing, all of them feel alive. They all feel really alive and they bubble. And yeah, and it is really good. I love it. So it will throw up curveballs. So you might do all of this. Let's say you've got 5 main characters, and it might be longer than a page, you know, and then that might change their storyline. So for example, you might have thought their storyline was to, I don't know, let's say you've got, okay, this is not a very good example, it's the first one that comes to mind. Let's say you've got a girl and she's really conscious about her weight. And maybe you thought her storyline was going to be to lose weight, okay? Really basic. But you're writing it from her point of view and you realise, you know what, that's not my storyline at all. I don't want to lose weight just to make anybody happy. My storyline is to realise I'm okay with my own weight. Okay, well that's her voice and she comes through really strongly. So little things like that. So when you write the character point of view and something different comes up, you can go back to step 3 and amend their storyline, i.e. how they change along the way and what they're learning. It's a lovely step, this one, to do. Once you've got that, and you'd also do it for your lesser important characters. Like I've got quite a lot of characters in my new book, so they don't necessarily take up that much space. There's a lot of different characters. So I'll do it with all of them. But if I was just doing it for Voices of Angels, I would literally do about 5 character arcs. But once you've got that, step 5 would be to do a detailed character chart. And this is really like a sort of resource document. So you create a chart for each of your characters detailing. This is where you kind of cover what they look like, their birthday. I mean, do you even know your character's birthday? Their history, their backstory, their motivation, their goals, and more importantly, how they were changed as a result of this book. So this time, spend as much time as you want on this, and then maybe you have it as a spreadsheet, maybe you have however you kind of design it can be quite fun as well. So you can have it as a mind map. Yeah, their astrology. I think you make your own, Jean. You can probably Google what a character should be made up of, but I think I like to think we can use our common sense and know what makes up a person. So if it's important to you to have the astrology, then yeah, pop that in. I do it for mine. I do think about the month that they're born, the star sign that they would be. I use it for mine. Not that it might come up in the story, but it influences their character. And I might put a column for how they look. Let's say it was a spreadsheet. Birthday, column for how they look, their hair colour, their height, column for what they like doing, their interests, have a bit about their backstory, all the basic stuff like that, any kind of unique characteristics about them, stuff about their personality. And then you've got the storyline stuff, you've got their goal, their concrete goal, you've got their abstract goal, and then you've got how they were changed as a result of this book. Now imagine, the way I think of this document whether for you it's a mind map that you put on your wall, or it's in a spreadsheet, or it's a Word document, or it's a journal. It's something that you can refer to. So you have it outside of your book, and it's like a lovely kind of like it's like the Bible. And when they do like soaps, they have like what they call the Bible, the Bible, and that's got all the character storylines and stuff like that. When they're doing new storylines, they can refer, all the new writers that come on board can refer back to the Bible. And that's kind of, that word might not be right for you, but I would call it a resource document. But that's really what this will be for you. And you've got all your characters there, and you can refer back to them, which is really great if you're planning, more than one book in the sequence. So you've got that. And again, I think this should be quite fun to do. It's kind of like, they've got red hair, they've got this, they've got that. Yep. I think, colour charts and textures, I think that's really good as well. Anything that makes you feel and see a character. And if you kind of like, that's really cool. If you're thinking of them like, oh, this character's really orange for me, or this character's like red and the texture is kind of soft and fluffy, or the texture is quite spiky, anything to give you a feel of what they're like, to make them different from each other. I mean, you've got all the characters up, you can also see their functions, whether you've got too many of one character, like in Voices of Angels, I got rid of the dad because he didn't serve a purpose, it was too much like the mum, so I just put them into one. And you got their goal and how they were changed, and it will make you feel so organised and really cool, and it will just add to the story. And like anything that, like Jean says, anything else that you want, how you want to present it, is completely up to you. Can be as creative as you like, and I think that's the point. Don't suck out the creativity from this and just make it into like a bullet point list. Make it as inventive, as creative as you like, which is why people like using that Pinterest thing, because you can have those little like scrapbooks and stuff, can't you? Which is quite good. Remembering that great fiction is character driven, and having just read To Kill a Mockingbird, you can really see how each character is different from the others. Okay, so take as much time as you need on this step, because this step is really the cornerstone of your entire book. Maybe in terms of time, this might take you a week to do. You're going just to backtrack the steps, you've done your paragraph, you've done your character overview, you've done your character storylines, you've done your character point of views, and now you're doing these detailed character charts. I don't know how long it would take you to do all of that, but let's say, off the top of my head, a couple of weeks or something, maybe a bit longer. I don't know what you feel about that, maybe a bit shorter, whatever. But you've got all of that, and at the end of it, you've got this amazingly deep resource of your book. So then you're ready to go on to the next step. And the next step is going back to the plot. So what you would do now is go back to your one-line sentence or paragraph that you wrote at the start of all this, and you would sort of think, has it changed the result of all these character exercises? Have the characters thrown up anything different that you didn't expect? And if they have, amend that story. And what you want to do now is kind of pop it into, or change it, expand it into a full paragraph. And this is where he describes it as a snowflake, yeah? He kind of says you've got the story set up. He says any major disasters, but you can substitute disasters for big things happening. And then you've got the ending of the novel. So each point is like a point of a snowflake. So what you've got is, he structures his book into 3 disasters and an ending. Each of the disasters take a quarter of the book to develop, and the ending takes the final quarter. Again, disaster doesn't have to mean like disaster. It can't just be thing happening. So it could be your cat dying, somebody going missing, murder, being called to action, or something more subtle if your book is more subtle. It's just those points of the novel which are turning points, I suppose, big turning points. So in the traditional 3-act structure, which is beginning, middle, and end, the middle taking up 2/3 of the book, the first disaster or big thing happening corresponds to the end of Act 1. So often at the end of Act 1, something big happens which pushes the story into Act 2. I know Genevieve's book, so it's the end of Act 1 is when the cat dies, which is a central kind of thing. for the main character to have to deal with, and that pushes her into Act 2, which is, oh my God, how do I deal with my life now without my cornerstone in my life? And then you would have the second big thing happening in the midway point of this middle act. So going back to my book, the end of the first act was when she had to leave England to go to Spain, or she chose to leave, actually. That was her call to action. And the midway point of the second act was when that hooper drowned, and she kind of realised, oh shit, I can't escape from this black mark stuff that's following me everywhere, and I've got a part to play in it. And then the third disaster is at the end of Act 2 and forces the beginning of Act 3. Back to my book, it was when she broke up with Rafa. Or it actually probably could have been, thinking about it, when she realised that her grandmother was dying, and that starts Act 3, thinking about it. He says it's okay to have the first disaster caused by external circumstances, and the second and third should be caused by the main character's attempt to fix things. Don't take too much heart of that. What he's basically saying is that you shouldn't just have external things happening, like it shouldn't just be an earthquake coming from the middle of nowhere. It's got to be sort of linked to their storyline. That's what he means by that, essentially. Not something just like, oh my God, I'm going to have a plane crash. They're going to need to have something big happening. If you've got any questions about this, do ask, just so you can feel like it's clear for you. But this is basically his structure, 4 parts to it. Beginning, first part, second part, end. If you've got any questions, do ask. If not, I just don't want you to get confused by his word disaster, that's all. And then remembering that these points in the novel correspond to the character's journey, yeah? So what are they going on? And if the journey is to escape the bad man, these big things that happen correspond directly to that story, i.e., she sees the shooting. The second bad thing is, oh my God, he nearly catches her. The third bad thing is, oh my God, he does catch her. And then we've got the ending, the end part. So, says Genevieve, I sense a question coming. Are you going to ask how this corresponds to your book? For you, it would be, the cat dying, thrust into the adventure, not quite going back, and then the end bit would be sort of going to the campsite and being called, having to go to that action, and then the midway through your book would be some kind of other breakdown or something like that, or something which keeps linking it together. You can have a couple of disasters quite close together. It doesn't really matter. But ideally, you do want them to sort of be fairly structured and spaced out, so that they, it really, just to reword myself, it really depends on the book. This isn't the hard and fast rule that corresponds to every book. I don't want anybody listening to this now or in the recording thinking, oh shit, my book has to correspond to this thing, because there isn't a hard and fast rule. And every book is an element of creativity, and I want to encourage your own creative self and to realise that actually, you can write your own book and it doesn't need these rules, okay? It really is an individual choice. So you've got to assess that when you're looking at yours. These are just guidelines. When you're looking at yours, yes, the overview answer is to say, yes, they should be spaced out, because you've got to be kind of constantly forcing the action on. But I think in relation to your book, as long as, there's something which happens midway through, and I think for me, again, this is a personal choice, but I'm a fan of big things happening literally directly halfway through the book. I think it's a good beat. And I think the second act of a book can be so long and can kind of sag. I do like this kind of 4-act structure. So as long as you've got something which happens halfway through the book, which is another kick, you can have 2 disasters happening close to one another. But then you would need something else as well that's happening halfway through the book too. And it might be more of an emotional disaster. Maybe she sort of has like a something, she has a big crying fit, or she opens up about her parents, or feels like she can't go on, or something like that. That's as simple as it could be in that case. Okay. Step 7, having got all of that done, you now kind of move on to your one-page outline. So take as much time as you want and expand each sentence of your summary paragraph, and then you make it into a full paragraph. And by this stage, you should have a pretty good idea of the structure of your novel. And by the way, if the story seems a bit broken now and doesn't really make sense, that's great, because now is time to fix it, rather than trying to fixing it after like 300 pages of manuscript. So you're just growing the story at the moment. You keep growing and developing the story. So take as much time as you want and expand each sentence into a full paragraph. So you're taking what happens in Act 1 and you make that into a paragraph. What happens in Act 2, make that into a full paragraph. What happens in the third quarter, make that into a paragraph. And then what happens at the ending, make that into a final paragraph. And in his suggestion, all but the last paragraph should end in a disaster, i.e. all but the last paragraph should end in a big thing happening, i.e. end of the first paragraph of Voices of Angels. It would be like, Lisa discovers that she has this kind of like unwanted gift of seeing people are about to die, and then her dog dies. Boom. End of the second quarter, she moves to Spain and she meets a lovely grandmother, she meets a love interest, she tries to hide from her gift, but bang, it hits her straight away, and she sees somebody else die. Bang. Third quarter, she's still trying to hide from the gift and this ability. At the same time, she's falling in love. And then the worst thing ever happens. She sees the black mark around her grandmother's head. She's going to die. Bang. Next quarter, coming to terms with the gift, she prepares, and what it means to her, she starts to prepare for her grandmother's send-off, and then, she thought Rafa and her get together and happy ever after, blah. That's how the book ends. So that's basically how it is. You're telling the book in 4 quarters with a paragraph each, if your book happens to fall into that structure. There are some optional steps. Oh, by the way, at the end of all of that, you'll have a pretty decent one-page outline skeleton of your novel, okay? Which maybe you could adapt to be into a synopsis at some point. Optional steps, which he does, but I have shied away from. But I know a friend of mine does do this. Create a spreadsheet detailing all the scenes that emerge from your outline. So literally do a scene-by-scene breakdown. What happens in each scene, who figures in each scene, stuff like that. For me, I don't feel like I could do that up front, because it would be too much, and it just feels a little bit too detailed. But I know some people that do that, but that's an optional. You could also create half-page documents for all the locations that you're going to use. I do this, I admit, because I feel like I need to know or inhabit my character's skin, I also need to inhabit the locations I'm going to use. So, for example, if mine is set in, there's a house, we will have a house. What does it look like? What are the, like Jean says, what are the textures of it? What does it feel like? Is it a nice space? How many rooms are in it? What kind of tiling is there in the kitchen? If at the school, and then something about the town, especially if the town plays quite an important role. So I do that for the locations too. Just so I know everything, just so I'm in that world when the book starts. I'm not trying to find that world. And if it's the house, you do want a couple of little descriptions of it, here and there. And then what I also do is I create a separate document for themes and motifs. So, for example, for my new book, I've just got all the motifs that I'm using, and then it brings up all the themes. And again, it kind of helps clarify my storylines as well and how they correspond to all the characters. So for me in particular, themes and motifs are really important and integral to my story lines. So that's why I do it. But they might not be for everybody. So that's why it's an optional for you. Motifs being the little things that kind of keep popping up throughout the book. So cherry blossom, for example, And you might even kind of look at the themes. How do the themes kind of come up within my characters? They're optionals. What I was going to say was, you might do all of this and think, oh my God, all the creativity is literally been kind of chewed up and taken out of me. But I don't think I would have thought that a few years ago, but I'm not necessarily a fan of a spreadsheet that does all the scenes, but I'm a fan of everything that comes up to that point, because unless I've really overdone the whole snowflake part, which might be a bit OTT, the snowflake as in the sort of structure and the big things and all of that kind of stuff, and you've analysed it to death too much. But what you've really done is just familiarised yourself with the overview of your book. And what you're leaving is just only a limited number of small scale problems to sort out. And exactly, planning frees your creativity. So rather than worrying about where this book is going and what's happening, you're actually giving yourself a lot of confidence to do it. And it means you can write quite fast as well. And yet you still got room to play, just as Jean says. And like lots of writers talk about how hard a first draft is. And I don't even think with this planning, I'm not saying it's going to be really easy. It's not something going to be like, oh my God, but it will be easier, and it can be easy if you allow it to be easy, but it will be easier. And the reason why a lot of first drafts feel hard is because writers lose their way, lose the plot when they're writing the book, so they don't know what's coming next. And that creates quite a lot of doubt in their own ability, or even they're doubting what they're doing is good enough because they're finding the book as they write it. And you have this feeling that something is wrong, but you don't really know what it is, you don't really know how to fix it. So what this does, it gives you confidence. You know what, and this is what he says, there isn't any reason to spend 500 hours writing a meandering first draft when you can write a solid first draft in 150 hours. I mean, he says it takes 100 hours for all this planning stage. I don't think it's nearly that long. But even if you spend like 50 hours or 20 hours planning it, you still come out way ahead with the time that you save from editing it after your first draft. The first draft or the first time you write a book, is such a learning curve for everyone about your writing process, and so don't be hard on yourself if you think it's taken a long time. It really is just a process of discovering how you write and what works and what doesn't work for you. And I did this. I wrote a first draft without even planning any of it, and then I had to rewrite the whole thing. And I've kind of almost done the same thing with my next book, so I still haven't got it really. But maybe that's my process. Maybe I do need to write a draft before I can actually start to plan it properly. Who knows? You're constantly finding your own way. And every writer is different, and so like there isn't like one method fits all, and you might want to take some of this and apply it, you might want to take none of it, you might want to take all of it, whatever, each of us is our own writer. But if you remember, what is true to all books is that all books have to have a main character going on some kind of journey, and that has to have some kind of conflict. Otherwise, there is no book. It's just like a reflection. It's got to be something going along the way. And because of the premise that all plot comes from character, i.e. all stories are character driven, when you spend all this time on your characters, your plot will emerge. So when you really look at your storylines of each of your individual characters, your plot is going to come out of that. And that's what makes a really strong book. These design documents are not fixed in concrete. They're not meant to be a straitjacket. You can actually amend them at any stage during the planning stage, or you can amend them even when you're writing. You can go back and do it. Think of them as a living, breathing set of documents that grows as you develop your novel. And like I said before, you can also use them as a promotional tool, and that keeps your sort of readership engaged in your progress, or even as like an extra bit of material after you've published. That's something additional for your readers to sort of have a look at. Because they're always interested in the writing process, and they want to know more, especially in today's age of kind of like it being so multimedia friendly. You want to offer them something else too. They're a guideline only, like they give you the space to deepen your story as you write it, rather than find it as you write it. There's a difference there. Using these, you can really go deeper. And I think you can too, because I think if you're not writing, if you're not discovering the characters as you write it, but you know all your characters' storylines and all what they're supposed to be changing, their epiphanies, when you write the story, I really do think you'll make it a lot deeper because you come to the page having a fully fledged character in your head before you even get to page one. And the difference between how you write it, I think it is a really, really huge, significant difference from just writing it with a vague kind of outline of so and so and so and so, and they just don't feel as real. And the story will just have a lot more depth and be a lot more layered. Like I said, you don't have to do all the steps, just do what works for you. I don't do the scene by scene breakdown, for example. And like I said, it takes time, but it saves time in the long run, and it will create a deep sort of multi-layered textured book that I think that you'll be really proud of, and you'll have all these amazing resource kind of documents, your own Bible, which will almost be like a secondary book, you know? And all of that stuff in that resource book, 3/4 of it aren't going to end up in your book at all, because that's the whole point of it. You're putting it all down in a separate document so it doesn't end up in your book. Otherwise, if that all went in your book, then you have a really messy book. So that's really cool. You almost get like 2 books at the end of it. Do any of you have any questions? And by the way, if you listen to the recording, feel free to ask questions about any of this in the group or whatever. So do you have any questions now listening to this live about any of the things covered in today's call, and how have you found it, and yeah, what do you think? Insights. Do you think your writing process is going to change as a result? Like mine has changed over the years. I've gone full circle almost. What do you think that you will take away with you? What spoke to you the most? Yep. Some require more processes, some less. Yes, I suppose, knowing that you write fiction and non-fiction, I suppose you do have to have a completely different approach to both as well. And Jen is glad. I'm glad it's been helpful. Yep, there's definitely stuff that we can be doing. In terms of your turn, i.e. what you can take out of this and take forward as a tangible, concrete goal, you can try some of the character exercises for your novel, and specifically I recommend the character storylines, which is the concrete goal, the abstract goal, what's stopping them, what they learn along the way, and also the character point of views, which is the when you tell the story from the point of view of a secondary character. For me, they were the most useful part of doing all of this, because it just threw up some really unexpected stuff, which was really exciting for the book as well. If you've got any more final questions, please do say. Otherwise, I will have my lunch disappear. And thank you for bearing with me today with the technical hitches we experienced at the beginning of the call, but thankfully it turned out okay. I'll upload the call recording and the notes to the group. Okay, great. All right, thank you. And that whole 1-sentence summary of their storyline, that's probably one of the good things to take away. That's all in the notes too. All right, thanks, ladies. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you in the group. Bye.